Hello, and welcome to Arts and Entertainment.
With Chris and Randall.
I'm Chris,
I'm Randall.
and welcome to the show. As always, if you're new to the show or you're returning to the show, and if you haven't yet started subscribing, please subscribe, like, share, and comment. Your comments are key. It is definitely how we shape this show. Hey, Randall, if someone wants to contact us, what's the best way?
Our Facebook page is really popular, so go to Facebook, Arts and Entertainment with Chris and Randall. You can check out our website, chrisandrandall.com, for other ways to find us.
Awesome. We really want to hear you, especially on this episode, because this is kind of a different episode. This episode, Randall is making a film suggestion. It's a hidden gem that you probably 99% of us never heard of. And yet at the same time, some of the people involved in this are huge. So how this ever made it under the radar, I'll never know. Randall, what are we going to discover today?
Well, this is a movie called Rock and Rule, and it's from 1980. Is it three, Chris?
1983.
1983, and it's like a rock musical. It's animated 2D animation made by an animation house called Nelvana out of Toronto, Canada. And I guess I found out in researching this film that Toronto, Canada is like some sort of major animation hub even today. And the company that made this movie went on to become a major animation production house, or 2D animation. This movie, I would say, is one of the best looking animated features ever. It's up there with
I agree, man. I mean, that's the thing I find amazing, is that this movie featured music by Blondie, Cheap Trick, Iggy Pop, Lou Reed. These are big people in the height of it. I'm 17 when this movie comes out. I love animation. I love the music.
Have you ever heard of this?
Never. Well, I may have heard of it like at some point. I may have even seen like a poster for it. But 17-year-old Chris Corbell, who loved Cheap Trick and Blondie and Iggy Pop and Lou Reed and liked animation, how the hell? Okay, it was 55-year-old Chris Corbell who, like, oh my God, I almost died before seeing this. So, Randall, how old were you? What was the circumstances when you first saw this film?
I think I must have seen bits and pieces of it on TV as a kid and thought it was amazing and didn't know what it was. And it was only years later when I finally accidentally watched it and I realized that this was the movie that I had watched as a kid, and it's pretty spectacular looking.
So you were like in your 20s when you came across it again?
God, when I finally realized what it was, it could have been like a few years ago.
All right. So recently, did you find it floating in the bootleg world, or where'd you find it, man?
I don't know what I was just researching something on the internet and I came across it. I can't remember how I came across it, but yeah, it's a little bit obscure, right?
Now,
I can't believe you never watched it as a kid. It was right up your alley.
We're going to make this super easy for our listeners, okay? So, listeners or viewers, if you're watching this right now, that means you're probably on Facebook or YouTube. There will be a link below on YouTube to watch the movie, and also the making of the movie. If you're listening to us, all you got to do is go to YouTube or Google it, which will take you to YouTube, and type in the following: ROCK, new word, AND, not ampersand, but AND, RULE, Rock and Rule, and you will see the American cut, not the Canadian cut, not the director's cut, which do exist, which if you want to own is $79.99 on Amazon Blu-ray. But if you just want to catch it and the making, after you think, my God, man, this was interesting, congratulations, we're going to give it to you.
Well, let me just talk about the versions a little bit, okay? So, I'll link to to an article from Cartoon Brew, which is like one of the greatest websites for animation, if you don't know about it. And they link to the YouTube movie and the making of movie in that article. And yeah, so supposedly, like the original of this movie, the original copy, it was destroyed in a fire. That's according to IMDb, and every copy that you see after that is like from a VHS master, which is sad. And you know what? You can see watching it. Any version you watch, you can see that like it does look like you're losing some detail for some reason. Well, because it's on VHS. But yeah, I mean, and another problem is the YouTube version is like the American version, but it's like a 4:3 version too. It's like because they shot it more in the theatrical ratio, which is closer to 16:9, and the Blu-ray, the American Blu-ray, is 16:9, and it looks great, right? That's what we watch, Chris.
Yeah, it looks great. We did watch it. I did just compare a little bit on YouTube. It's fine. It's fine on YouTube. No, I'm just gonna say because I don't want people.
No,
to
you're right. It doesn't look bad.
And I will say this much. So the thing about this is, well, first let's tell them a little bit of the story. So Randall, just give us like a synopsis of what this is about, rock and roll.
You mean the story?
Yeah, the plot.
Well, you know, it's really fascinating because they're trying to make they get all the top rock and roll talent of the era,
Yeah.
and they're trying to make a story around and we're gonna probably give spoilers away right now, so
Well, we're going to try to, let's keep it as spoiler.
should we try to give it spoiler free? Okay,
Absolutely.
We'll try to give it spoiler free.
The general gist of what's the first act. What's the setup?
well, the setup is, I mean, they pretty much set it up with a Star Wars style scroll in the beginning with text. There's been some kind of nuclear apocalypse, and everybody on Earth is now like a crazy animal. A crazy animal human hybrid, and they never really explain why, but that's just how it is. I mean, it's just so that they could get it's just so they can make classic animation, you know, where you have talking mice and other animals.
Right. So it takes place in a dystopia in the not too distant future with anthropomorphic human animal beings.
It's a post-apocalyptic universe, which was really popular at that time, and I remember as a kid I used to love those stories, you know. It's like a Mad Max kind of world.
And who was the hero, the heroine, the protagonist, the villains, the supporting characters?
I don't know. Should we reveal that? I think.
Yeah, I want to tell them. Look, that much we can talk about. Sure, just the hero, the main cast.
Well, the interesting thing about the story is they secure all this musical talent, and then they tried to make a plot and a story and characters all revolving around the music. So the big bad guy is
well, who's our hero? Let's start off with the hero before we get to the villain.
Well, the hero, there's like 4 heroes, and they are like a garage rock band, and they just want to play their music and be discovered, and you know, it's a very simple story with those folks.
2 lead singers, a brash young man named Omar Quaalude, and his girlfriend and also singer who wants to get her songs in, Angel. Angel is voiced, every time she sings, she's the voice of Deborah Harry, except she's voiced by a professional animator, but when she sings, she's Deborah Harry. And when the young rocker Omar Quaalude, which should tell you already, this is for adults, he sounds like Robin Zander of Cheap Trick. And well, you know, villain, you know, there's 2 other guys in the band whose names I literally cannot remember now, but they're comedic side characters. One is chubby with glasses, and the other one is kind of doofy. And they're one plays drums and one plays guitar. I mean, one plays keyboards. There's, you know, it's like any other animated group. But then there's the villain who's the grand rocker, Mock, right? Tell us about Mock.
Well, you know, the Mock character is a one of a kind. I mean, it's I don't know where Nelvana got the idea, but they
I can tell you because it's Evil Mick Jagger.
Yes,
it is Evil Mick Jagger. That is the whole premise. I thought originally it was David Bowie, by the way, which is.
But why would you make? Okay, but Chris, why would you make Mick Jagger the villain of a movie? I mean, where do you even get that idea?
Oh, because Mick Jagger, if you ever saw him in any of the films he did in the late '60s and '70s, he played villains, and it is this kind of very grand, I mean, it's a Mick Jagger. It's a very theatrical Mick Jagger, and I do feel like it looks like Bowie, but I realize now that in 1983 Bowie looked too young. Yeah, actually, even Mick. So what happened was this: Mick Jagger's people found out that it was supposed to be a satire of Mick Jagger, and they said, "We don't think you should do that." Which is the equivalent of just before we're going to say we're going to sue your life, we're going to sue it for you for every penny. So, but yeah, anyway, he's a fading legend who is going to unlock a porthole if he can just find someone who can sing the right notes in the right key in the right way. And I don't want to say more than the fact that Angel seems to be the one who's really made an impression on him.
Yes.
I think that is all you need to know in order to tease it out. Now, the animation in this is, to me, very reminiscent of Ralph Bakshi, who had done movies like Lord of the Rings, the animated version, and Fritz the Cat. And we'll talk a bit more about Bakshi. But that style of animation, can you elaborate more what makes the animation on this film?
Well, there's this technique they used in this movie, and Bakshi loved it too. It's a technique called rotoscoping, where you record on film or video today, but you record on film actors acting, and you just record an actual scene or actual scenes, and then you just draw over every frame with animation. Walt Disney used it a lot in Snow White. So when you watch Snow White, what you have is Snow White being played by an actress, and they're drawing over that actress to turn her into Snow White, and then the dwarves are just like your typical animated Disney characters, and I don't think they're being rotoscoped most of the time.
Right. So it started out with Disney, right? Using this effect.
You know, rotoscoping goes way back. So I think one of the early rotoscopers that used it a lot was Max Fleischer. Do you remember a character called Betty Boop? So Betty Boop, I think...
And he did the Supermans from the 1930s.
Yes, so the Supermans are rotoscoped. Okay, there's a lot of rotoscoping in those Superman cartoons. That's why the movement looks so true to life, because it is true to life.
So like Snow White is rotoscoped.
Snow White is rotoscoped. I mean, rotoscoping is obvious when you understand what they're doing. They're just recording somebody on film and then tracing over every frame. So it's quite obvious. But, you know, there's good rotoscoping and bad rotoscoping. You know, it's like sometimes rotoscoping could go wrong. You know, it's like it really takes good taste and the taste of the animators and the animation department to understand when they need to break the rules and they need to not slavishly, you know, trace over the frame. I would say Rock and Rule is some of the best rotoscoping ever. I think some of Bakshi's work, he's a little too slavish to what the characters are doing. I don't want to denigrate Bakshi, though. I mean, he's a master, obviously.
No, I only bring up Bakshi because in many ways it is a cousin of what's going on in America with Bakshi. But you're right. I mean, we'll also have a link to the YouTube video. On YouTube, there's a making of, which shows them doing the rotoscope models. So can you explain how those planes and models work when you're filming animation?
Oh, you're talking about using multiple planes?
Yes, and how they do that with animations that use models, is not just life models, but, you know, models of things that are objects.
Yeah, you know, Max Fleischer, again, was a huge innovator in this. Imagine when you're recording animation with a camera, you are just taking a picture, and you can put all sorts of things in that picture. You can make a background that's a model, a 3D model, and then you can put a plane of glass in front of it and draw on the glass, and then you can have multiple planes of glass in front of the camera, and each plane of glass can be a different distance from the camera lens to give you a sense of depth. Max Fleischer back in the 20s, I want to say, was using these techniques big time. He did a Betty Boop where Betty Boop is walking down the street and walking in front of these buildings, and the building she's walking in front of is a 3D model, and Betty Boop is being rotoscoped. I mean, it's amazing. Fleischer's amazing.
It's interesting. In the making of, they do interview the effects designer who came up with the program to get multiple cameras, as you call them, planes. And it does create a sense of depth and perspective. And it gives you a really good sense of mise en scène, as the French would say. I mean, everything that happens... No, but it's interesting because...
Yeah, every frame of this is beautiful.
I've seen a lot of anime films from that same period, which is gorgeous in its own right. But what's kind of nifty about this particular aesthetic is that places that are dingy or lived in or worn out seem much more realistic. It has more of a lived in quality. Things have weight and depth. I know some of these techniques you don't see rotoscope anymore, but certainly when Pixar does a movie, they will use the facial features and physiques often of the actors in order to inform the character choices.
Au contraire, you know where I think you see a lot of rotoscope
Well,
today?
you see that? Do they still use rotoscope? Because I know, like in Beauty and the Beast, for example, they really did use the principles for when they did their faces.
Well, I'll say a couple things.
So rotoscope still does exist. My bad. I'm not an expert in this. Please tell us more.
Well, I'll say a couple things about rotoscope. Sometimes you can't always pick it out because they are deviating from the filmed actors a lot. But for some reason, Walt Disney, you'll see in a lot of Disney movies, Walt Disney used a lot of rotoscoping, like tons. And for some reason, Disney wanted to hide it. He didn't want to publicize that fact. But every now and then, you can find in Disney stills archives or Disney stills come out that show actors being recorded for the rotoscoping that's about to happen, and they dress up in the costumes of the character, and I mean, they're acting the whole thing out. It's amazing. They act out the whole movie sometimes.
Do
maybe that's an exaggeration.
Use rotoscope?
I want to say Pixar. I don't know if Pixar does, but what I want to say about rotoscoping today is I think rotoscoping is used a lot with computer animation, so computer graphics in like live action movies, so like say superhero movies. Okay, so the primary example is Gollum, right, from Lord of the Rings. So they put all the motion capture, the mocap markers all over that actor's face. What's the actor who plays Gollum? He's big. He's really famous now. But that's motion capture. And that's motion capture for what? For rotoscoping. But you're doing the rotoscoping in a computer now. So, I mean, I think in a certain way, like Bakshi, Bakshi was trying to, in a lot of his movies, he was trying to, like in Fire and Ice, he was trying to rotoscope action sequences. And today, what do you see? You see, basically in these superhero movies, all these rotoscoped action sequences. So Bakshi was way ahead of the curve, I feel.
Right. So rotoscoping more or less has actually moved into live action. It's the digital animation we see in live action.
Well, yeah, I would make the argument though that that a lot of these live action movies are like half animated, really.
Okay, well, stick around to the very end, and if you haven't figured out yet who played Gollum, because I'm also trying to remember his name, and I can't switch away from this. So I will. If you've already known it, you've shouted it out. Randall, can you just look it up, because we literally.
Okay, I'll look it up.
Just take this moment. But while Randall's taking a moment to figure this out, let me talk about what makes this movie so special for me. So this film features 24 original songs.
It's Andy Serkis.
Andy Serkis, thank you very much. So 24 original songs, 23 of which are by Blondie, Lou Reed, Iggy Pop, Cheap Trick, and Earth, Wind & Fire. There's one comedic song, and that is fine. It's supposed to be a bad song. It's voiced, one of the voice actors sings it. It's fine. But what's really interesting here is, and the composer too, for that matter, the late Patricia Cullen, they all, with the exception of Earth, Wind & Fire, come from the rock and roll world. And, you've got a lot of like the downtown New York scene, the punk scene with Iggy Pop does one song, but you got Lou Reed, and you've got Blondie, and you've got Cheap Trick. Now, even the Cheap Trick songs, there's one Cheap Trick song, it's Robin Zander and Cheap Trick, but the song was written and produced by Chris Stein, the leader of Blondie, and Deborah Harry. So you literally have like Cheap Trick and Blondie. Now, Cheap Trick is such a West Coast 70s power pop band that by the late 70s, early 80s, was definitely getting into things like science fiction, definitely really leaning harder into keyboard stuff. Like, did you know that song, The Dream Police?
I
But
I probably know it if I
Cheap
heard it.
Trick, yeah, The Dream Police. So that's a song that a lot of people who don't know Cheap Trick know. That came out like a year before this. So it is other than another song called Voices, which for you guys who are more into Cheap Trick, you know that this is right up their alley, was my point. And then the lead man, Angel Omar Quaalude, great name and insane. You know, he is based on that blonde, long hair, blonde rocker who can just jump in the air and just wear a guitar. And again, if you don't know anything about Robin Zander was this gorgeous young guy with long blonde hair who literally looked like an actor playing. Uh, have you ever seen Cheap Trick?
Like
Video or
live?
anything? No, just a video. Do you know what
Yeah,
I'm
I saw the
talking
videos as a kid.
All
Yeah.
right. So they are like, you know, their drummer, Rick Nielsen, who writes the songs, including the ones in this movie. He wears a baseball hat and he has a checkered tie. So they had a look. They were a very theatrical band. So was Blondie. Actually, all the musical groups in this, including Earth, Wind, and Fire, all would wear costumes of a sort. All had some degree of theatricality already baked into it. They already wrote about science fictions and dystopia. Iggy Pop came from the Stooges. You know, he had that real underground. He does one song. It's the big bad song. And Lou Reed of the Velvet Underground. You know, he does all the mock songs. And you know, Lou Reed has got that very dark. You know, you totally buy him as a weird. I never thought of him as the evil Mick Jagger, and yet his ability to get into that swagger and to the depth and the hardness is wonderful. And this is vintage Blondie. This is Blondie really at the very end of what I would consider the height of their career, because it's coming off of like It's coming off of Auto American, so it's 1982 that came out. They're so big at this point that the movie comes out like right after they put out like Rapture, The Tide Is High, and Call Me. I mean, they're really big. Same with Cheap Trick. Lou Reed, if you're a fan, this is a good period of his work. Same with Iggy Pop, not as much. And then Earth, Wind, and Fire, which was probably the biggest disco band of 1982, 81, 83. Really heavy hitters. They throw in a song, and again, it's all original. They were told what the story is. They read the script. You know, for Blondie, for Rick Nielsen of Cheap Trick, for Chris Stein, for Lou Reed and Iggy Pop, they knew the characters because they were writing songs for characters. Whereas for Earth, Wind, and Fire, they were writing a dance song for a disco and for a particular kind of strange science fiction disco. And if you know the song Boogie Wonderland, you know science fiction disco is the heart of Earth, Wind, and Fire. So, I mean, everybody watch the making and you'll see everyone but the guys from Cheap Trick talking about the process. But this is so cool because the people who are animators loved rock and roll. It was a very young hit crowd. It's a rock and roll story, but they use these songs for inspiration. The musicians were inspired by the script, and then the songs inspired the animators. Normally, when you see movies, today you do actually see new songs, but in that period in history, no. In that period in history, it would just have been like you take a movie like American Pop, which came out like a year beforehand and is about pop music. There's maybe one original song in the whole thing. But animated films back then that were not Disney films, if they were going to, and they rarely did reference pop. Actually, this may have been Heavy Metal has a few songs too, so that's not entirely true. But this and Heavy Metal are very unique for it, and this one even more so. Now, I will warn you, this is not like a Disney movie where the music has its own sequences like a musical. It doesn't. The music comes on, and then it goes, and the plot continues. There are no great, maybe one or two big musical moments where the music is the show. So don't expect anything like a Disney movie in that sense. But if you know the music, none of these songs would be released by the artists until years later on like box sets or extended editions. Somebody on Spotify actually put together a streaming list. So if you want, you can stream, I think, about 18 of the 24 songs, which is pretty impressive. Um, I wish to God they'd put out a soundtrack. I don't think they could legally do it, but the
What did
fact
you
that you
think
have
about the music? Did you like it?
oh well, you have great bands doing original music not in their catalog that to this like I never had heard these songs by Earth, Wind and Fire. And how does anybody go this long in our Gen X world and not know it? That particular song got released in like '96 on a box set. I think all of the songs eventually all the artists do get to release, but man, to me, the strength of this movie and why I really hope you do invest the 1 hour and 17 minutes is because the music is so good. And at its heart, to me, this it's a very conventional movie. If you, not, which doesn't say it's bad. It's just what to me is groundbreaking for you is just how well it captures some of the great rock bands of the '70s and '80s, and really uses the music.
Can I just say
So
something
well.
else about this that I've been thinking about is just
Mhm.
this movie is like almost like a time capsule. It just captures that era so perfectly. Not just the
Oh,
music, but like the
absolutely.
attitude, casual drug use,
Yeah, Omar Quayle.
nightclubs,
Yeah, it is. It
uh,
is. It. You know, this is a good point to say.
arena
So I think
rock, casual sex. I think are a couple of the
absolutely,
things.
God love the Boomers because between the era of 1970 with Fritz the Cat through this film, 13 years, you have movies like Bashki's. A lot of it is Bashki, but you have like Fritz the Cat, the sequel to Fritz the Cat, Heavy Traffic, Hey Good Looking, Wizards, the heavy metal movie, which these guys were approached to do and turned down because they wanted to do this movie instead. American Pop and this. And these were not movies made at all for children. They were not made for families. These were made for pot smoking, drug using, hard drinking teens and 20 somethings of the hippie and blank generation who just wanted to see, they just wanted to hear curses. They wanted to see nudity. They wanted rock and roll. They just wanted the hard. And for 13 years, really shockingly enough, they were able to just squeak it through. And I don't know how. Have you ever seen? I saw Heavy Traffic when I was in college. I was stoned out of my mind. Just I no, I was drunk, I was stoned, and the movie was beautiful. And for some of you watching this movie, you're like, I'm not telling anyone to go and down to the dispensary and buy some legal, drugs or anything. I'm just saying, yeah, I am saying, I'm absolutely saying this is a movie. I'm so sorry that I am a sober, non-head person now, but yeah. What's my point? My point is this. Um, this was a very unique time where young people were doing animation. It was a unique time where you could do an X-rated movie that was animated and R-rated movie that was animated, that people respected the genre enough. I didn't see this, but I did see American. So the most successful thing was Fritz the Cat did pretty well. Heavy Track got great reviews. These are all Bashki. Then Bashki does the first Lord of the Rings, which makes a ton of money. Then he puts out American Pop, which looks at American pop music for about 100 years, which does well. People go to the theaters. This should have done well given the fact that Gen X kids were into science fiction and animation. And it did make $30 million eventually. But I think the reason why this film didn't do well is because by 1983, with Reagan as president, with Mothers Against Drug Driving, I think there was becoming a moral majority. America was going through a conservative turning point, so much so that in the Canadian version, they have curses and sex and stuff they had to cut out for an American distribution. So I think what
Yeah.
happened was they made a movie, they didn't know how to market it, and that's why this was the last great North American adult animated film. The equivalent of this is literally like watching The Last American Virgin, which also comes out around that period, where it's like a teen movie so dark, so edgy, so beautifully true that after this they could never make anything but happy-go-lucky John Hughes films.
Yeah, animation is an incredibly personal medium, 2D animation especially. I mean, much more than 3D, because there's somebody has to sit there with a pen or a brush, and they're literally drawing onto the frame you're going to see in the movie. And all these movies, Bakshi's included, he's got a whole team of people working, but every person has to make decisions in that frame, and it's a very personal art form. I mean, you see it today, with any kind of 2D animation, especially the stuff coming out of Japan. But yeah, so these animated movies from Fritz the Cat to this one in '83, Fritz the Cat's in '77. I mean, you watch any of these adult animated movies, they're very personal. You can see they're like the animation team is really translating what they're seeing around them, the life around them, into these movies. And
you're right onto something, which is that their influence on Japanese anime in the '80s is much easier to see in so many ways more than its influence on American animation. Because American animation, like Disney animation, it did do some pretty interesting stuff. We'll probably talk about one day Black Cauldron, Secrets of Nim, on the Don Bluth studios as well. But once Little Mermaid comes out, which is only a few years later, what Little Mermaid is '89, so it's only 6 years later. But once Little Mermaid comes out, it just changes animation to a money-making family. It brings it back up to an A-list in a way that would make something as adventurous in this much harder to put out. I don't want to overpraise the things about this film, and I don't want to put down the Disney movies. I'm just saying that once movies like Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast come out, animation is too high tone a product for you to put out drugs and alcohol and sex.
Well, I just want to say that I think the rise of VHS tapes really changed a lot of things, because Disney could release their whole catalog on VHS, and kids they ate it up like they were drugs almost, and kids are watching these movies over and over and over. When I was a kid, we didn't have a VCR. We didn't get a VCR until I was in high school. But people used to in the VCR era, people used to watch movies over and over and over again. Kids love to watch stuff over and over anyway. So, I mean, Disney movies for little kids, they were huge. I mean, now we're getting the streaming era, and it's maybe it's going to be different now. But yeah, I mean, Disney made a ton of money selling animated movies during the VHS era.
Well, absolutely. Now, I don't want to say there isn't any kind of legacy, because obviously, if you're watching BoJack Horseman, which is a great show, you can see quite a lot of that sensibility, and it's probably a much better version of that, with anthropomorphized people, social satire, characters, real depth and feeling. Absolutely. And even some of the better seasons of The Simpsons definitely do that. And I've seen, if you've seen any of the Oscar-nominated Best Animated Films, certainly there is a lot of well-done adult animation. But the well-done adult animation, I think, today either falls into very good biting satire or just very good, mature, restrained filmmaking. Whereas, as you say, it's a legacy of the hippie punk generation, these movies. They're just balls to the walls. They're anarchical. They're mondo. They're not really trying to aspire to being something meaningful or good. They're not trying to make a higher point. There's things about it, it's very slapdash. There's things about it that is too offensive for today. Not too much, thankfully. Oh my God, thankfully. But it just captures a moment in time that, again, is aesthetically part of that late 60s to early 80s sense of, you see it in movies like Caddyshack and Meatballs, right? That same sort of just let it all hang out and have fun.
It's almost like a window into another dimension, the movies from this era. Especially
really
Bakshi's. I mean, whenever I watch a Bakshi movie, it's like, I don't know, there's a certain feeling, there's a certain sensibility that I feel like is just, it's dated, it's gone forever. I mean, it's that 70s sensibility.
That's what I'm saying. It's not that you can't make movies like this again. I mean, I really would like it, considering, even when they do use contemporary pop stars today with new songs, it's a weird thing to say, but it's kind of like a cheap slice of pizza or a cheap taco or a really greasy spoon hamburger place where you like all the stuff they put in it. Whereas today you can't get a cheap hamburger or a cheap slice of pizza anymore. Everything is so gourmet of such high quality, and in many ways, it's like you don't have the music to make this, you don't have the anarchical spirit to make this. In many ways, you don't have the quality, but you also have too much quality. You know what I'm saying? I mean,
it's all very corporate, isn't it?
No, I don't even mean it in a bad way. I just mean that today's you would need a stronger storyline. The music would have sequences. It's kind of like a dirty pleasure is what I'm trying to convey. That's the charm of it. You know what I'm saying? Like that's why I said it's like, when there's a part of town where there's a burger joint you like, but it's not a great burger. You just like the taste of the grease and the onion. It's the White Castle effect.
Well, it's real, right, Chris? It's a real burger. It's like not like that corporate stuff,
It
right?
has the junk food sugars that gets you a little high. And that's the best way I can say it. And it's such, as you say, a moment in time. Well, Randall, do you have any more you wanted to add?
Well, let me just say, like, after this movie comes out, Nelvana, the company, they totally pivot, and they made the Care Bears movies, and they just made what you'd consider kids animation, and they're one of the biggest animation companies today.
Yeah, and they ended up, it's funny, even though this was their one and only shot, and then they just go into children's stuff, they also do the early Star Wars animation as well?
Oh, yeah, we didn't even talk about that, but so Nelvana started out by doing a lot of science fiction stuff for CBC television, and the reason the founder started Nelvana is because the CBC required by law like a certain percentage of Canadian produced content, and they didn't make any animated content. So some entrepreneurs saw an opportunity there, so they started making bumpers for CBC, and then they made some Christmas specials and things like that, holiday specials. And Lucas saw these; they were science fiction themed. So Nelvana made I would consider the first Star Wars episodic, which is like instead of part of the Star Wars grand story, right? And that was on the Star Wars Christmas special. It was the 10-minute short starring Boba Fett.
Did they create Boba Fett?
You know what? In my research, I couldn't figure it out, but it's possible.
Were they just hired to introduce Boba Fett? Did they come up with the design for Boba Fett, or
I have no idea.
No, it's such a brief cameo that Boba has. But
no, it's not. You should watch it, Chris. He's like a totally fully. You should watch. Have you watched it?
I watched it when it came out. I haven't seen it.
Okay,
since.
so that was like in the 70s.
Yeah,
he's
forgive me for not remembering what happened 46 years ago.
Boba Fett is a fully fleshed character in this. In fact, he reminds me very much of the Boba Fett in the Mandalorian. Yeah, and then after that little 10-minute thing. Nelvana went on to make the Saturday morning shows Droids and Ewoks, which were more Star Wars episodics.
Wow.
So, today we're transitioning into Disney Plus and Disney owns Star Wars, and Disney's going to be making a lot of Star Wars episodic content. And the real trailblazer there was this little Canadian animation company called Nelvana. And I don't know. I'll say something about this though. I don't know where the writing came from. I don't know who the creators really were, but Nelvana, if you watch the early holiday specials, which I have, that are science fiction themed, you see that Nelvana has a real good grasp of how to do science fiction, and they understand science fiction. So it's not a stretch for me to think that Nelvana had a huge hand in helping craft the modern Star Wars universe because of that.
Wow, that's so cool. Well, I want to thank you again, Randall, for sharing this gem. We will, from time to time, share with you guys stuff that you may have not caught, that, hey, it's worth a second look. Until then, I'm Chris.
I'm Randall.
Be well, and thanks for listening, or watching, or both. Bye.
Bye.